I just got my shipment in from Mayesh LAX. The way that I get my stuff shipped in is I usually get a hold of my rep and then I say I just kind of want a mix of this, and then if I have something that I absolutely need for the following of the week or for that week, I'll just tell her, hey, is this available? Can you add this in? So like this week, I needed sunflowers and delphinium and red roses for a service, and so she tagged those on for me. And so in the previous video, I kind of went through everything that I got, and then in this one, I'm going to kind of show how I process my flowers. And so first off, what I start with is, let me grab it real quick. I'll show you the two products that I use. So this one, I've used a couple of different brands, and then I happen to really like this one because it's easier management of the dosage. So this one is Floral Life Express 200 Easy Dose. And so what this looks like is they are little packets that are perforated, and you measure out your water and you put this in your bucket. And when you're processing your flowers, you want them to be, the water to kind of be room temperature or the same temperature as the flowers that you're processing. So if you have flowers that come in, like mine are cold packed when it's buried, but they come in with, they're all wrapped up really nice, and then they come in with ice packs inside them to keep them cooler. So my water that I use, it's a little cooler than room temperature, but say if you get your flowers and they're, you know, nice and cool to the degree that they're in a cooler, you don't want to use warm water because that'll just shock them. So you try to put them in the same water as the temperature that they are. So I looked at the packaging and saw what the dosage measurements were on each of them. And so those little easy dose packets, they're for, one packet is for 1.5 quarts. And so I got this picture that's measured in 1.5 quarts, and then obviously 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3 quarts, because in some of my buckets, to get the level of water that I need for their stems to be, you know, submerged, I have to use 2. And then some of them I use 1 because they've got a skinnier bottom and, you know, the water level is higher. The next thing that I have to prepare is I got my scissors and I got my nippers. And when I process flowers, I use my heavier, dutier nippers. And then when I work with flowers, I use my cutting nippers. And so the first thing that I start with, we'll just start with this bundle of roses right here. I'll scoot this over. So with roses, I like to strip the leaves, obviously, so none are gonna be in the water line, because then that'll just get your water all nasty. It'll plug up the bottoms of your stems. And so I've got my roses, and I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna pull off all of these leaves till it's wrapped up right here. And I wear gloves because my fingers turn green. And when I work with eucalyptus, that stickiness in the eucalyptus it's really hard to get off. So I'll just strip these real quick. And there might be other ways to do it. I know some actually have like stripping machines, or they use like an actual, I have a stripper for the roses, but since I don't work in like super high volumes, I have the time to just hand strip it. And so that's what I do, just to do it that way. Okay, one more leaf. So here we are. They're all stripped up to the up to where they're wrapped in this cardboard. And then what I do, so this one's actually got one short little rose right there, and I want to make sure that all of these are going to get in water. And you want to at least cut them at least 1 inch to get these, you know, dead. Look at those ends; they're all dried out. So I'm going to take my nippers. I'm gonna cut them at an angle, at least 1 inch. Whoops. And I've read like people do this underwater with roses, so that way, you know, they're always fully submerged and they don't get any air bubbles in their stems. I don't have a big sink where I can do them in the water. So all of these guys are cut at least 1 inch. They got nice, you know, fresh edges. And then I dip them in my quick dip solution here for just a second, and then my fresh bucket. So the quick dip solution that I use is Floral Life Quick Dip, and then it actually has instructions here on the back on how to use it. So if you have any questions, and Floral Life, if you go onto their website, and want to read their articles and stuff, it goes through the process of how to do everything to get the best possible care for your flowers. And so I always use like this container. I have a different container and I just put a little quick dip down in the bottom of it. And so with my roses, I'll fill up that bucket that the roses are in, and then I'll put it in the cooler, and then after about an hour in the cooler, that's when you want to take that wrap off and then take out all the paper and stuff, because they're wrapped with, they've got like cardboard in between every 8 roses. They've got like 4 on top, 4 underneath, cardboard and paper. So you want to take all of that out so it doesn't mold and rot in there. And then some people will leave like the plastic on them. I don't, just because I don't want it to get in the way of what I'm doing here. Again, you want to make sure there's not going to be any leaves that are in that water, or else they'll murky up that water and then make it not good. Same thing. In there. I did leave the plastic on that, even though I said I wasn't going to. Like I said, personal preference. Sometimes I leave it on there, sometimes I don't. Here's some hypericum berries. And you also want to look to see which plants or which flowers like to be with other flowers. So roses do not like to be next to eucalyptus. You'll run into some problems with that if you put them next to it. And then like stock, they don't like to be touching each other at all, or any other flower. So, you know, some need a lot of space in a bucket and some don't. It's just flowers. And that's something to figure out along the way, or you can always research them as you go. The reason why I'm pulling off these petals in the hypericum berries is sometimes when I get them, they do mold a little bit. All right, the snapdragons, they like to keel over, and so I do leave the plastic on these guys when I put them in the bucket, so that way their ends don't start to topple over. And I put these in my taller buckets so they have more support. So I've got like 3 different sizes of buckets that I use with them, and then it's just kind of dependent on the flowers. So these ones are super long, and personally I don't need them this long because I'm not going to have any orders that are going to call for this long a stem. So I'm going to take off quite a few inches on these. But say if I had a wedding and I was doing some really big installations, then I would use the longer stem. So here's my taller bucket that I use for the taller flowers. And then here's my shorter bucket. I mean, there's not too much different height, but that's what I do. And then I'll just kind of go through and put in longer stem stuff in with the taller bucket, shorter with the shorter. Same with Alstro. I go through and I take down most of this greenery, just because a lot of their petals a lot of their leaves get bent, and then they just like break off, and then they end up falling in the water, get your water all dirty, and then your flowers just don't last as long, you know, when they're in dirty water. And I like to clean and reprocess my flowers every 2 to 3 days, dependent on, it's sometimes dependent on, I have a cool box cooler, you can't see it in the video, but if I am super busy and that door is like opening and shutting, you know, there's a little bit more of a temperature fluctuation in with the flowers, and you can see it, you know, because it takes a second for it to get back down to temperature. And so if I'm super busy and the flowers are starting to look like, you know, a little peaked because of that temperature fluctuation, I'll give them a fresh snip, and then I'll put them in a fresh bucket of water, and then let them rehydrate and let them do their thing. Just like a little refresher. And so I'm gonna take off about an inch and a half on these guys. You know, at that nice angle. Put it in that taller bucket there. Let's see, get my wire cutters for this part of it. And then get off some of these leaves on the bottom that are a little bit brown, a little bit not very appealing. And same with these, I don't need these to be this long, so I'm gonna cut off you know, a couple inches on those. So put them in the dip and put them in there. So I hope that was a little helpful. I've got some ranunculus here. I'll leave these guys in the plastic because they also like to keel over a little bit. And then same with the stock. I'll give these guys enough space, you know, so they're not touching. Because if they're touching, you'll start to see lots of mold. It's the ethylene that these express out of their leaves. I've done a little bit of research on like ethylene blockers, but I'm not sure if where I get them from, if they're treated with it. But the more ethylene that's released, the quicker your flowers are gonna go bad. So I usually put my stock, I'll leave it in the plastic, or no, I don't leave it in the plastic. I separate it and I kind of put it up higher on my shelves in my cooler so that way they're not around everything and releasing all that ethylene to mold out all my other flowers and make them prematurely bloom. So I hope this was a little helpful and have fun making flowers.